Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Brooklyn-based clarinetist, saxophonist, and composer Ken Thomson. He put together a new band for his latest project called Sextet on the new Focus recordings. He is a staple within the New York City contemporary music and jazz communities, and he's widely regarded for his ability to blend a rich variety of influences and styles into his own musical language while maintaining a voice unmistakably his very own. Guided by a desire to create music in which composition and improvisation are equally important and codependent, this project is the latest in a series of recordings the composer has made, unifying these traditions. So please get to know Ken and dig this interview, my friends.
So Ken, thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
So I got to tell you, of all the packaging of CDs that I get, this is the most unique packaging ever. It's like I almost felt like I was getting a laser disc, or like a 45 that was glorified. I was like, this is awesome. So anyway, it's great packaging.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I wanted to do something a little different.
Yeah, and it's totally different. I mean, I love the Red Wagon. It's nice and big, and it has kind of a nice organic artistic spin on the back. So let me ask you about this album. I've really enjoyed listening to this CD. Talk to me about this album, how you feel about it.
Well, I love it. That's the first thing. I feel good about it. You know, I've been working with, my life is somewhere between the nexus of jazz and like contemporary composed like classical music. And so what I've been trying to do for my past few records, and this one is in a lot of ways an evolution of what I've been working on, but is to try to combine these ideas. So instead of having a jazz tune where you've got a head and then you solo, short head, and then you solo for a long time and then you play that short head again, my idea is, what if the composed element of what we're doing is longer, more involved, and more akin to what, composers in other genres are actually doing. And then, but without losing the essential element of jazz, which is the improvisational element as well. So that's, something I've been working on with a group I had called Slow Fast for a while, and now this is kind of the next step on that, which is to have four horns and bass and drums. So really just have as close to the bigger texture of the chamber small group jazz as possible, leaving out the chordal instrument and, just having a serious rhythm section.
Where were you born and raised?
New York City area, but not in the city. Born in New Jersey, lived close to the city, and then went to college in New York, and then basically stayed there. I mean, the great thing about going to school in New York is that, by the time I was done there, I was basically already playing in bands and, playing out in the city and doing that kind of stuff. So I basically stayed at that point, which now that was in the mid-90s, so it's been a moment since I've been in the city, but luckily I get to travel quite a bit as well.
Right on. So when did you start on the alto sax, and what jazz albums were you listening to when you got into jazz initially?
So I started on alto was my first saxophone, which is the one that I'm playing on this record, and that was probably around 14. It's a funny thing, being even as close as I was to New York, the jazz records that I heard at the beginning, I knew there was something I liked about it, but I wasn't really hearing great stuff. It's incredibly difficult, I think, in the suburbs, and I've talked to a lot of other musicians about this too. It's really, especially at that era, which is pre-internet era, watch out, it was really hard to find music a lot of times. And so, when you have your band director telling you that, some of the fusion stuff that he was really into is the best place that jazz has ever been. You're like, oh, okay, I guess it's jazz. But when I went to college in New York, I spent basically most of my time there at the radio station, which is this radio station called WKCR, which is one of the top jazz stations in the New York City area. Basically, very serious about what they're doing and have a lot of incredible resources there, both in terms of records and in terms of the DJs there and the historians who've been there for decades. And that's when I feel like I really got a handle on what jazz was and got a much better sense of it. So, you know, a lot of the jazz that I was drawn to was kind of in between, you know, not similar to the music that I'm doing, but with people who are going after the same thing. So, like, you know, getting really into Duke Ellington and getting really into Charles Mingus and the people who are, like, very serious about composition. And, of course, at the same time, you know, being a saxophone player, you know, idolizing, of course, Bird and Coltrane and, you know, all of those guys as well, just to, you know, hear what they're doing as improvisers and thinking about the trajectory of what they're doing. As well as something that was really influential to me was like a lot of the third stream movement that was happening, you know, in the late 50s and 60s about people who were combining, you know, some sort of Western classical music with the sounds of jazz, and some of those experiments in that way as well were really definitely inspiring to me. Through this whole thing, you know, I was, besides playing saxophone, I was also trained as a classical clarinet player as well, and I also still play clarinet quite a bit. So that's, you know, the other factor that was always happening at the same time, and that's why I always kind of had an ear out for a lot of different styles.
When you made New York City your place that you were going to be after school, talk to me about, did you know that music was going to be your life, that was going to be your career?
No, definitely not. No, I did not think that I had worked enough, and I probably hadn't still at that point. I hadn't practiced enough, hadn't worked enough, didn't have anything my act together yet. And it was like a real slow, slow genesis, I would say, even through my 20s, where I was just kind of thinking, am I going to really be a musician? I don't know. Am I really? Yeah, I guess, you know, and I feel like, it's one of those things that kind of kept hitting me in the face. You know, enough times that when I was 30, I said, okay, I need to stop doing this office job and just play, you know, and that was, 12 years ago or so. It's the kind of thing that, continually came back to me over time. And one of the things that kind of worked out, when I got out of school, I was working with my collaborative group called Gut Bucket, and we were started getting regular gigs at the Knitting Factory, which was like one of the essential, like, New York downtown jazz clubs at the time, and experimental clubs. And as we started working there more and more, we started meeting some of the other musicians that were part of that scene, and wound up getting hooked up through there to a European booking agent, and took a lot of the music that we were doing at the Knitting Factory downtown in New York and brought it over to Europe. At which point, we were kind of shocked that people over in Europe, like, kind of took us seriously. That was like a huge thing for me, because we were thinking, whatever, we don't have anything. There are all these incredible musicians in New York. We're just like these kids, just messing around kind of. We got over there, and people just kind of saw more easily and more quickly the history of what it was that we were doing, that we were kind of aware of, but kind of thinking, I don't know if we have anything, and that response and getting that validation, which is funny that it happened not in the States, not in New York, was incredibly, allowed us to kind of take ourselves more seriously and say, oh, maybe there is something here. Why don't we actually be a little serious about this? And what would that be like? And so that was part of the a slow cascade of events that led to me, being serious about what it is that I do.
And you're obviously, fully a jazz musician. You're serious about it. So I want to ask you this. Why do you love jazz?
I think that's a great question, because it's actually, it's miserable having a life in jazz. You know what I mean? This is what I can say. The music that is on this record, there's a lot of written material, and the horns are playing a lot of the time. It's like, it's really challenging, musically. But some of my favorite parts, we just did a 10-day tour in the States, and then we did a week tour over in Europe. Some of my favorite parts of the tour were when I wasn't playing. The favorite parts of every night were when I got to hear Anna or Russ, or this guy Nick Finzer who was playing tromone with us. When I got to hear them improvise with the rhythm section and just really go for it every night. Those were my highlights of every night. It's when, okay, the written music is done, and now people get to blow. And just hearing what had the spontaneity of what happened every night, hearing solos develop, night after night, and people introduce new concepts, and hear the rhythm section get, tighter and tighter. I love that. That's what I love about it, and just hearing that, it's just so essential, also, because I have this background playing, all written music as well. there's something about, that relationship of rhythm section and soloist that is just kind of undeniable, and it's the music that I love, and to me it's like, I'm just so referential to that, it's just so important to me in terms of what I listen to and what I love, but also, like Night to Night, it's just such a essential part of like the joy to me of what music is this, having this interaction and this true, creativity night after night.
So let me ask you this. What's the future look like for you? What do you want to see happen in, say, 10 years from now, 5-10 years from now?
I feel like I want to just, when you're studying music, you kind of think that there's going to be a time when you know your instrument and you can kind of stop. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, now I know how to play saxophone. I'm good. Now I'm just like, doing what we're doing, just playing. Now I've done all the learning part. Now I'm just playing, And the same thing with writing music. The more that I play and the more that I get to work with really like incredible musicians, I realize that all of my favorite musicians, no matter where they are in their life, they're still learning. They're still at the point where they're saying, oh, I'm getting better every year. Like they can be in their 50s or 60s and they can still say, hey, I'm doing better than I'm better than I ever was, and I'm still learning and I'm trying to get new things together. And, and to me, that's the process that I'm not sure what my project is going to be in 10 years, but I know it's going to be an evolution of what I'm doing now, and I hope that it's going to be better because I feel like with every new thing I do, I get better at it, whether it's writing or whether it's playing in different contexts. And so for me, what's exciting about this and what's exciting about moving on is not only getting to collaborate with new musicians from really, across the world, but also to have this, this constant drive to do the next thing and to get better.
So this is my final question for you. Everyone has a version of you or a perception of who they think you are. Your family, your friends, your fans, but you know who you are. Who do you think you are?
That's an incredibly tough question. I think, honestly, someone said to me the other day, we were talking about music, and this was another musician, and she said, sometimes I play music from people, and I just don't, I'll do it, but I don't get it, and I don't hear the humanity in it, and I don't understand. And she said, when I hear your music, she said, I feel like a lot of you is wrapped up in your music, and I said, that's actually true. And I think that there's, the truth is that the music that I write and the music that I put out there is actually in some ways like closer to who I am as a person, even though it's abstract. You know what I mean? It's not something that you can put into words, but the way that the music sounds, the way the music feels, kind of the emotional give and take of the music, whether it's dark or light or happy or sad, whatever it is, to me, that's like the closest thing to what I actually am inside. You know what I'm saying? It's something that it's not, it's a harder thing to say in words, and I think that's sometimes why a lot of us become musicians, because it's like, it's the most natural way of expressing ourselves and saying who we are.
I like that. That's a great answer. It's a great way to wrap everything up. Ken, thank you for talking about Sextet and about your life and music to Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Brooklyn, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Ken for his cool, his music, and that time. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.